Check your coffee, sir." The boy's voice was so quiet that for a moment Edward Whitmore thought he had imagined it. He was standing by the tall window of his corner office on the 42nd floor, a porcelain cup halfway to his lips, looking out at the gray river bending around the city the way it had bent for 200 years. The cup smelled the way it always smelled on a Tuesday morning, dark roast with a thin curl of steam rising from the surface, and a small clean note of cardamom that his assistant added because his late mother had once added it to his coffee when he was a boy in Atlanta. Everything was exactly as it should be, and yet the boy was still standing there in the doorway with his hand resting against the frame, watching him with the kind of stillness that did not belong on a child. "What did you say?" Edward asked. He recognized the boy, or thought he did. The son of one of the cleaning staff, maybe 9 years old, maybe 10. He had passed him twice in the lobby in the past month, once on a Saturday when the boy had been sitting on a bench reading a paperback, and once on a Thursday when the boy had been waiting near the service elevator with a small backpack on his shoulders. Edward had never spoken to him. He had nodded once, the small polite nod he gave to people whose names he did not know, and the boy had nodded back. "Don't drink it, sir," the boy said, a little louder this time. "Please. Just don't drink it." Edward lowered the cup slowly. He was a man who had built a life on not reacting to surprises. He was the chairman of Whitmore Holdings, a private equity firm whose name appeared on 3 buildings in this city and on the financial pages of newspapers in 4 countries. He did not change his morning because a child appeared in his doorway. He did not change anything because of a feeling. He looked at the boy and tried to keep his voice steady and patient. "Son, how did you get up here?" The boy did not answer the question. His eyes were not the eyes of a child playing a game. They were the eyes of someone who had been waiting in a stairwell for the better part of an hour trying to decide whether to be brave. "The man who brought it," the boy said. "I saw him in the hallway outside the kitchen this morning. He was holding a small bottle in his hand. He poured something into a cup. Then he wiped the bottle with a napkin and put it in his pocket. Then he carried the cup down the hall to your office." Edward did not move. He felt his own heartbeat in a place he was not used to feeling it, somewhere low in his chest just under the bone. The cup in his hand was suddenly very warm. He set it down carefully on the small marble table beside the window. He did not let go of it. He simply set it down and left his fingers wrapped around the porcelain because he was not yet ready to step away from it. "Which man?" Edward said quietly. "What did he look like?" The boy thought about it. He did not rush. He had the kind of carefulness in his face that Edward had seen over the years only in people who had grown up understanding that the wrong word in the wrong room could end a conversation forever. "He was tall," the boy said. "He had dark hair combed back. He was wearing a gray suit, not a black one. He had a silver watch on his right wrist, not his left. And he wasn't wearing a name badge, but everybody else in that hallway was wearing one. That was the thing I noticed first. That's why I followed him." Edward closed his eyes for one long second. There were 43 people on this floor at any given hour, and he could have named perhaps 6 of them without looking at his calendar. He did not know who had brought the coffee this morning. He had not looked up when the cup was placed on his desk. He had been on a call with Singapore, and the small porcelain cup with its thin curl of steam had simply appeared next to his elbow at 8:14 the way it appeared every Tuesday for the past 9 years. He opened his eyes and looked at the boy. "What is your name?" he asked. The boy hesitated. Then he said, "Marcus." "Marcus," Edward repeated, the way a man repeats a name when he wants to fix it in a place inside his head where important things are kept. "Marcus, I want you to do something for me. I want you to step inside the office and close the door behind you, slowly. Don't run. Don't look back down the hallway. Just close the door and come stand by the window with me." The boy did exactly that. He pushed the heavy glass door shut with both hands, careful not to let it slam, and then he walked across the long stretch of pale carpet until he was standing beside the marble table where the cup of coffee sat untouched. Up close, Edward could see that the boy's shirt was a faded navy blue with a small tear near the bottom hem that someone had tried to mend with thread that did not quite match. His shoes were clean but scuffed at the toes. He smelled faintly of the lemon-scented soap they used in the building's restrooms, the kind in the metal dispensers near the sinks, and Edward understood without needing to ask that the boy had washed his hands carefully before coming up here because he had wanted to look presentable when he told a stranger that someone was trying to kill him. "Marcus," Edward said quietly, "I need you to tell me everything. Slowly. From the beginning. Don't skip anything." "When did you first see this man?" The boy took a small breath. His shoulders trembled once and then settled, the way a small bird settles on a branch after a long flight. "It was about an hour ago," he said. "Maybe a little more. My mom works in the cleaning crew on the 38th floor. I came up with her this morning because there's no school today and the babysitter canceled. She told me to sit in the break room and read my book and not bother anybody. I was reading. I was on chapter 6, and then I needed to use the bathroom, so I went out into the hallway and I took the wrong turn coming back. I ended up in the catering hallway, the one near the freight elevator where they bring up the coffee and the breakfast trays. Go on. That's where I saw him. He was standing by one of the steel carts, the ones with the silver lids on top. He had a cup in his hand, a white cup like that one." The boy nodded at the marble table without looking at the coffee directly. He had a small brown bottle in his other hand. It was about the size of a bottle of eye drops. He unscrewed the cap and he poured something into the cup. He was careful about it. He counted the drops. I saw his lips moving. He poured maybe 4 or 5 drops. Then he screwed the cap back on. Then he took a napkin from the cart and he wiped the bottle off and he put it inside his jacket pocket. The inside pocket on the left side. Edward did not move. He listened the way a man listens when he understands that the rest of his life is being decided in the next 2 minutes. And then he picked up the cup and he walked down the hallway toward the corner. There's a sign on the wall that says executive offices and an arrow that points that way. He followed the arrow. I followed him. I stayed back because I didn't want him to see me. He took the small private elevator at the end, the one that needs a card to use. He had a card. He swiped it and the door opened and he got in. The door closed before I could see what floor he pressed. "What did you do then?" "I went back to the break room. I sat down. I tried to read my book again, but I kept thinking about the bottle. I kept thinking, why would a man put drops in a coffee and then wipe the bottle and hide it? People don't do that with sugar. People don't do that with milk. People don't hide their hands when they're doing something that's allowed." The boy looked up at Edward. His eyes were steady. "My mom always says if something doesn't look right, it's because it isn't right, so I got up. I asked the security man at the front desk on 38 what floor the executive offices were on. He said 42. He said the chairman's office. He said your name. Then I took the stairs." Edward looked at him for a long moment. "You took the stairs," he said quietly, "from 38 to 42 by yourself?" "Yes, sir. I didn't want to use the elevator because I thought he might be on it." The boy paused. "I'm sorry it took me so long to get here. I had to stop twice on the landings. I was breathing hard. I didn't want to come in here breathing hard because I didn't want you to think I was lying." Edward Whitmore, who had not cried in front of another person in 26 years, felt something move sharply behind his eyes. He did not let it show. He had built a career on not letting things show. He simply nodded once slowly and looked away toward the window so that the boy would not see whatever was in his face. The river outside was moving the way it always moved on Tuesdays, dark and slow under the pale sky, and a small barge was working its way south toward the docks. Edward watched it for the length of 2 breaths. Then he turned back to the boy. "Marcus," he said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am going to ask you to stay in this office with me for a little while. I am not going to call anyone yet. I am not going to drink that coffee. I am not going to leave this room. I want you to sit on that sofa by the bookshelf. I want you to put your feet up if you want to. There is a small refrigerator behind the bar. There is orange juice in it and there is water and there are 2 small bottles of chocolate milk that my granddaughter likes. You can have any of them, do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now I am going to make 1 phone call. Then I am going to make another phone call. While I am making them, I want you to drink something and rest. You ran up 4 flights of stairs to save a man you don't know. You don't have to do anything else for a little while." The boy walked to the sofa. He sat down on the very edge of it the way a child sits when he is not sure he is allowed to be there. He did not put his feet up. He folded his hands in his lap and waited. Edward looked at him for 1 more second. Then he walked around the long desk and picked up the phone. He did not call security. He did not call the police. He called a man named Howard Brennan, who had been the head of his personal protection detail for 11 years and who had once been a senior agent at the Bureau before he had decided that he would rather work for one man than for an entire country. "Howard," Edward said when the line picked up, "I need you in my office. Now, use the south stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Do not speak to anyone on the way up. When you get to my door, knock twice, pause, knock once more. Do not announce yourself by name, do you understand?" There was a small pause on the other end. Howard Brennan had heard Edward Whitmore use this tone exactly 3 times in 11 years. He did not ask a single question. "On my way," he said. 6 minutes. Edward set the phone down. He looked at the cup on the marble table. It was still warm. The steam had thinned but had not yet stopped. He looked at it for a long moment and thought about all the Tuesdays in the past 9 years on which a similar cup had been placed beside his elbow at 8:14, and he thought about how many of those cups had been exactly what they appeared to be and how many perhaps had not. He did not know the answer. He did not need to know it yet. He needed only to know about this one. He sat down in his chair and looked across the desk at the boy on the sofa, who was now slowly sipping a small bottle of chocolate milk with both hands wrapped around it the way a much smaller child would hold a cup. The boy met his eyes once and gave him a small, serious nod, as if to say, "I am still here. I am not going anywhere." "Marcus," Edward said quietly, "while we wait for my friend to get here, I want to ask you one more thing. The man you saw in the catering hallway, the one with the bottle, did you see his face clearly enough to recognize him again? If I showed you a photograph, could you tell me whether it was him?" The boy thought about it carefully. He did not rush. "Yes, sir," he said. "I think so. I saw his face from the side when he was pouring the drops, and I saw it from the front for about 2 seconds when he turned around. He didn't see me because I was standing behind one of the catering carts. But I saw him. He had a small mark on the side of his jaw near his ear, like a scar but not deep, more like a line, and his eyebrows were dark but his hair had some gray in it, mostly near the temples, and he was wearing a watch that wasn't like the ones the catering staff wear. It was thicker. It had a black face." Edward nodded slowly. He picked up a pen and wrote 3 lines on a small notepad. He did not show the notepad to the boy. He simply wrote, "Gray suit. Right wrist watch, black face. Scar near jaw, hair graying at temples. Catering hallway, 38th floor." He looked at the boy again. "Marcus, do you know what I do for a living? My mom says you own buildings. That is part of it. I also own a company that owns other companies. About 17 of them. They make different things. Some make medicine. Some make machines. Some build houses. And inside all of those companies, there are people who like me and people who do not like me. There are people who would be glad if I lived a long time, and there are people who would be glad if I did not." He paused. "I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what you saw this morning is probably not random. The man in the hallway did not choose me by accident. Someone sent him." The boy's eyes did not widen the way Edward had expected. They simply became very quiet. "I thought so," Marcus said softly. There was a soft sound at the door, 2 knocks, a pause, 1 more knock. Edward stood and crossed the carpet quickly, unlocked the door and stepped back. Howard Brennan came into the room without speaking, closed the door behind him and locked it himself. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with close-cropped silver hair and the kind of calm in his face that did not change whether he was ordering breakfast or pulling a man out of a burning car. He had done both in the past year. His eyes went first to Edward, then to the cup on the marble table, then to the boy on the sofa. He did not ask. He simply nodded once at the boy the way a soldier might nod at another soldier across a field, and then he looked at Edward and waited. Edward told him. He told him in 3 minutes what had happened in the past 20. Howard listened without writing anything down. When Edward finished, Howard walked to the marble table, knelt beside it, and looked at the cup from 3 different angles without touching it. Then he stood and took a small evidence bag from the inside pocket of his jacket. He always carried 2. Edward had teased him about it once, and Howard had said, "A man who carries evidence bags is a man who is ready to remember things correctly." "I need the cup intact," Howard said quietly. "I need it sealed and on its way to a lab within the hour. I have a lab. It is not in this building. The results will come back by tonight, possibly sooner. Until then, no one on this floor learns that anything happened. No one in this building, Do you understand me, Edward? Yes. The boy stays with me. Howard looked at Marcus. He spoke gently the way he spoke to his own granddaughters. Son, your mother is downstairs on the 38th floor. Yes, sir. What is her name? Doreen Hill. Thank you. I'm going to send someone quietly to let her know that you are safe and that you are with Mr. Whitmore. She is not going to be told why. She's going to be told only that you are helping him with something and that you will be back with her this afternoon. Is that all right? The boy nodded. Howard turned back to Edward. I'm going to walk the catering hallway myself in about 12 minutes. I want it to look ordinary. I want the cameras pulled before I get there so that whoever is watching the feed does not see me looking too carefully at the wrong card. Give me 30 minutes for the first pass, then we will talk about what to do next. Howard. Yes, find the man with the scar. Howard met his eyes. I will. He picked up the cup with a gloved hand, slid it carefully into the evidence bag, sealed it, and walked out the way he had come. The door clicked softly behind him. Edward stood by the window for a long moment after he was gone. He looked at the river. He looked at the small barge that was now almost out of sight around the curve. He thought about the 17 companies. He thought about the 3 board meetings scheduled for this week. He thought about the lawsuit that had been filed against the medical division in April, and about the merger he had blocked in March, and about the partner he had quietly forced into retirement in January because the man had been moving funds in a way that did not have a clean explanation. Any one of them or none of them, or a name he had not yet thought of. He turned around. Marcus was watching him from the sofa, the small empty bottle of chocolate milk now set carefully on the side table beside him, the cap screwed back on as if the boy had been raised to leave a place exactly as he had found it. Marcus, Edward said quietly, I think you should know something. You did not just save my life this morning. You did something much harder than that. You made a decision that most grown men in this building would not have made. You saw something wrong and you did not look away. Do you understand how rare that is? The boy thought about it. My mom looks at things, he said finally. She taught me to look at things. Edward sat down slowly in the armchair across from the sofa. For the first time that morning, he was not behind a desk and the boy was not on the other side of a room. They were 2 people sitting in a quiet space with the city laid out behind them, and Edward asked the question he had been wanting to ask since the boy had first stepped through the door. Tell me about your mother. The boy's face changed in a small way that Edward recognized. It was the way a person's face changes when they are about to talk about someone they love and are trying not to make it sound bigger than it is. Her name is Doreen Hill, Marcus said. She has worked in this building for almost 4 years. She used to work 2 jobs, but last year she stopped the second one because her back started hurting. Now she just works here. She wakes up at 4 in the morning. She makes my breakfast and packs my lunch before she leaves. She comes home at 6. She makes dinner. She helps me with my homework. She reads with me before bed. On Sundays we go to church and then we go to the library. Where is your father? The boy looked down at his hands. He died when I was 4. He was a bus driver. He had a heart attack while he was driving. He pulled the bus over and parked it and made sure all the passengers were okay before he called for help. The doctors said if he hadn't pulled over, he might have lived. But he didn't want anyone to get hurt. The boy paused. My mom keeps a picture of him on the wall by the kitchen. She talks to it sometimes. Edward did not say anything for a moment. He was thinking about the kind of woman who would raise a boy like this on the wages of a cleaning crew shift, who would teach him to look at things, who would send him into the world with the conviction that doing right was its own reward even when it cost you. He was thinking that he had walked past her in the lobby 100 times without knowing her name. Marcus, he said, when this is over, your mother and I are going to have a conversation. The boy looked up quickly. There was a flash of something in his face that was not quite fear but was close to it. She didn't do anything wrong, sir. No, that is not what I mean. Edward leaned forward slightly. I mean that I owe her something. I owe her something for raising the kind of boy who walked into my office this morning. I do not yet know what that something is. I will figure it out, but she is going to know my name the way I now know hers. The boy thought about that. Then he nodded once, and his shoulders settled the small fraction that they had been holding tight. There was a soft buzz from the desk. Edward stood and picked up the phone. It was Howard, and his voice was low and quick. Edward, I am in the catering hallway now. There are two carts here that match what the boy described. I have located the camera feed from this morning between 7:30 and 8:10. There is a 6-minute gap in the recording. The system says it was a routine refresh. It was not. Someone pulled the feed manually and re-uploaded a loop. They were sloppy. The same pigeon flies past the window 3 times in 2 minutes. I have the original somewhere on the backup server and I am pulling it now. How long? 40 minutes for the footage. The lab is faster. I should have a preliminary on the cup within the hour. Howard, the camera pull. That means someone in the building. Yes. Someone with access to the security system. Yes. A small silence on the line. Edward, Howard said quietly, there are only 9 people in this building who have that level of access. You are one of them. I am another. That leaves 7. Edward closed his eyes for one long second. Get me the list, he said, and get me the footage. He set the phone down and looked across the room at the boy. Marcus, I need to make one more call. After that, I am going to have lunch brought up to this office. You are going to eat something hot. Then I am going to ask you to look at some photographs and tell me whether any of the faces are the man you saw. Yes, sir. Edward picked up the phone again and dialed a number that was not in any contact list and was not written in any place that could be searched. It was a number he had memorized in 1998 and had used perhaps 11 times since. The line picked up on the second ring. It's Edward. I need a quiet sweep of my building. I need it done within 4 hours. I'm not calling the authorities yet. I want to know what I am dealing with before I decide what to do about it. Send people who can come in as maintenance. Send people who will not ask questions of my staff. I want eyes on every floor by 2 o'clock this afternoon. He listened for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you, Daniel," and he hung up. He did not explain the call to the boy. The boy did not ask. They sat together in the quiet office and waited. 43 minutes later, Howard came back. He came up the south stairwell again. He knocked the same pattern. Edward let him in and locked the door behind him. Howard walked to the desk, set down a slim laptop and opened it without speaking. Then he turned the screen toward Edward and Marcus and pressed play. The footage was grainy in the way that internal security footage always was, but the man was clearly visible. He was standing beside a stainless steel cart in a narrow hallway. He was tall. He was wearing a gray suit. His hair was dark with gray at the temples. He took a small brown bottle from his inside left pocket. He unscrewed the cap. He poured carefully, counting under his breath, into a white porcelain cup. He screwed the cap back on. He wiped the bottle with a napkin. He put the bottle back into his pocket. He picked up the cup and walked out of frame in the direction of the executive elevator. The whole thing took 91 seconds. Edward watched it twice. The second time, he watched the man's face when he turned his head briefly toward something off camera, perhaps a sound, perhaps the door of the freight elevator opening. The man's face was visible for 2 full seconds. There was a small scar along the right side of his jaw, just below the ear. "That's him," Marcus said quietly from beside the chair. "That is him," Howard said. "His name is Vincent Marsh. He has worked in this building for 14 months. He came in through a third-party staffing contract for executive catering. His background check was clean. It was also, I now know, fabricated. The references on his application are real companies. The phone numbers on his application route to a single answering service in Delaware that was set up 6 weeks before he applied. I have the records. They will not hold up to a serious look. They were never meant to. Who is he really? I am working on that. The face is not in any database I can access in the next hour. I will know more tonight. What I do know is that he is not in the building right now. He left through the South Service entrance at 8:22 this morning, 8 minutes after the cup was delivered to your office. He has not come back. His phone is off. His apartment, the one listed on his employment file, is a short-term rental that was paid in cash through January. Edward absorbed this slowly. And the cup. Howard exhaled. The lab called 5 minutes ago, preliminary only. They will have full results by 6 o'clock. The cup contained a colorless, nearly tasteless compound. It is not a household poison. It is not something you buy. It is something that is made. In the dose that was in that cup, it would have caused symptoms consistent with a cardiac event within 40 to 90 minutes of ingestion. There would have been no obvious sign of poisoning. The death certificate would have read heart attack. You are 61 years old. You have a known family history of cardiac issues. No one would have asked. Edward sat very still. No one would have asked, he repeated quietly. Howard closed the laptop. He did not sit down. He stood with one hand resting on the edge of the desk and waited the way he always waited when he had given Edward information that required a decision rather than a reaction. Edward, he said, the list of 9. I have it. 7 names besides yours and mine. I think you already know which of them we need to look at first. Show me. Howard slid a single folded sheet of paper across the desk. Edward opened it. He read the 7 names slowly. He had hired 6 of them himself over the course of the past 20 years. The 7th he had inherited when he had acquired the building in 2014. He knew their wives. He knew their children's schools. He had attended 2 of their weddings. He had spoken at the funeral of one of their fathers. He read the list 3 times. Then his eyes settled on the 4th name. Gregory Alden, he said quietly. Howard nodded. I thought so too. Gregory Alden was the chief financial officer of Whitmore Holdings. He had held the position for 9 years. He had access to every system in the building. He had been with Edward in Singapore on Monday night and had flown back on the same plane at 6 o'clock that morning. He had been the one to suggest, in a quiet conversation in January, that perhaps the partner who had been moving funds in unexplained ways should not be forced into retirement but should instead be allowed to retire with dignity. Edward had not listened. He had pushed the man out anyway. Gregory had not raised the issue again, but it had been Gregory, 4 months ago, who had brought Vincent Marsh's catering contract to Edward's attention with a small approving note attached. Reliable provider, background clean, recommend. Edward had not even read the file. He had signed the cover sheet and moved on to the next item in the stack. Howard, he said quietly, I want to be careful here. The fact that Gregory recommended the contract is not proof. He recommends a dozen contracts a quarter. I do not want to destroy a man's life because of a coincidence. Agreed, but I want to know where he is right now. Find out. Howard picked up his phone and stepped to the far corner of the office. He spoke quietly for 2 minutes, listened, spoke again, and then ended the call and walked back. He is in his office on the 40th floor, Howard said. He has been there since 7 this morning. He took one phone call at 8:13, 1 minute before your coffee was delivered. The call lasted 41 seconds. It came from a number that is not in our internal directory. I am pulling the routing now. Edward looked down at the list again. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his inside jacket pocket. Howard, I want you to do 2 things. First, I want a full reconstruction of Gregory's movements for the past 6 months. Every meeting, every flight, every dinner that the company paid for, every dinner he expensed personally. Second, I want the partner I forced out in January. I want to know where he has been living, who he has been talking to, and whether his name has ever appeared in any document that also contains Vincent Marsh's name. The man's name was Carter Reeves. You remember him. I remember him. Go quietly. Use Hannah's people if you need them. I will. Howard left. The door closed behind him. The office was quiet again. Edward turned toward the sofa. Marcus had not moved during the entire conversation. He had sat with his hands folded and his eyes lowered, the way a child who had been raised in church sits during a long sermon, present but careful not to interrupt. Now he looked up. Sir, he said quietly, are you going to call my mom soon? I told her I would be back by lunchtime. Edward looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since the morning had begun, he smiled. It was a small smile, tired around the edges, but it was real. Yes, Marcus, he said. We are going to call your mother right now. Edward picked up the desk phone and pressed the line for the 38th floor reception. He asked, in the calm and ordinary voice he used for ordinary requests, whether they could send Doreen Hill up to the chairman's office. He said it was nothing to be concerned about. He said her son was helping him with a small project and he wanted to thank her in person. He said it the way a man says small things when he wants the staff on the line to repeat the message to their colleagues exactly as he had said it, without coloring or alarm. Doreen Hill arrived 7 minutes later. She came up alone in the elevator. Edward opened the door for her himself. She was a small woman in her late 30s with her hair pulled back in a practical knot and the kind of upright posture that came from carrying things for a living. She was wearing the gray uniform of the building's cleaning crew. Her name tag was slightly crooked. She saw Marcus on the sofa first and her shoulders dropped about a half inch, and Edward understood that she had been holding her breath since she had been told to come upstairs. "Mrs. Hill," Edward said quietly, "please come in. Your son is safe. He is not in any trouble. I am going to explain to you what happened this morning, but before I do, I want you to sit down and I want you to know that the only reason I am alive at this moment is because of him." She looked at him for a long second. Then she walked to the sofa, sat down beside her son, and put her arm around him without saying anything. Marcus leaned into her side the small fraction that 10-year-old boys allow themselves to lean. Edward told her. He told her in plain language, leaving nothing out except the names of the suspects. He told her about the coffee. He told her about the catering hallway. He told her about Howard and the lab and the footage. He told her about the moment her son had walked into his office and what her son had said. She listened without speaking. Her hand stayed on her son's shoulder. When Edward finished, she sat for a long moment looking at the carpet between her feet. Then she lifted her head and looked at Edward. "Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly, "I have raised that boy by myself for 6 years. I have done it on what this building pays me. I have done it because his father taught me before he died that you do not measure a life by how much you have, but by what you leave behind in the people you love. I am not surprised that my son came up here this morning. I am not surprised that he saw what he saw and did what he did. I am surprised only that the world finally let him be seen for it." Edward nodded slowly. He did not trust his voice for a moment. "Mrs. Hill," he said when he could, "there is no version of this that ends with the two of you returning to your apartment tonight and tomorrow continuing as if nothing has happened. The men who tried to do this to me will know by tonight that they failed. They will be looking for the reason they failed. They will look at the cameras. They will see your son in the catering hallway. They will see him going up the stairs. I cannot leave the two of you in a place where they can find you." She did not flinch. "What are you proposing? I have a property in the country. It is 3 hours from here. It is staffed and secure. There is a small school within 10 minutes of it that I have supported quietly for many years. I would like the two of you to go there tonight. Anthony, who drives for me, will take you. You will be guests, not employees. You will stay as long as it is necessary. When this is over, we will talk about what comes after." Doreen looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Marcus. Then she nodded once. "Thank you," she said simply. "That was all. That was enough." By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Howard had what he needed. He came up the south stairwell for the 3rd time that day, knocked the pattern, and laid 2 folders on Edward's desk. The first folder contained a printout of phone records. The second contained a single photograph and a short typed summary. "The call to Gregory's office at 8:13 this morning came from a prepaid phone purchased at a convenience store in Wilmington 6 weeks ago," Howard said. "The same prepaid phone made 2 other calls in the past month. Both of them were to Carter Reeves. Both of them lasted longer than 30 minutes. Edward looked down at the records. He did not speak. "Vincent Marsh," Howard continued, "is not Vincent Marsh. His real name is Victor Marston. He spent 11 years in private security in 3 different countries. He left the last position under circumstances that were not made public, but that were serious enough to end his career on that continent. He came back to the United States 2 years ago. He has been available for hire, quietly, for the right price. He has been associated with 2 suspicious deaths that were never formally investigated. He is, in plain language, the kind of man you bring in when you want a problem to look like an accident. And Gregory," Howard exhaled slowly, "Gregory has been making payments to a holding company that ultimately routes to Carter Reeves for the past 7 months. The payments are disguised inside legitimate vendor invoices in the medical division. The total so far is just over $2 million. He started the payments 6 weeks after Carter was forced out. I have the bank trail. It is clean enough to take to a prosecutor." Edward looked at the second folder. He opened it. The photograph inside showed Gregory Alden, his chief financial officer of 9 years, the man who had stood beside him at the funeral of Edward's wife in 2019, sitting at a corner table in a small restaurant in Wilmington with Carter Reeves and Victor Marston. The photograph was dated 3 weeks ago. All 3 men were laughing. Edward closed the folder. "Howard," he said quietly, "call Detective Sandoval. I am ready now." What happened over the next 48 hours moved with the kind of speed that money and preparation can buy when both are pointed in the same direction. Gregory Alden was arrested in his own office on the 40th floor at 6:15 that evening. He did not resist. He looked, when the officers came through his door, like a man who had been waiting for it for a long time. Carter Reeves was picked up at a hotel in Wilmington an hour later. Victor Marston was found in a rental car at the Canadian border the following morning. The prepaid phone was still in his glove compartment. The charges were read on the steps of the courthouse 3 days later: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, hearing of an assassin, wire fraud, embezzlement, identity fraud. The lab results from the cup of coffee were entered into evidence. The security footage was entered into evidence. The testimony of a 10-year-old boy named Marcus Hill, who had walked 4 flights of stairs to tell a stranger that something did not look right, became the cornerstone of the prosecution. Edward did not attend most of the proceedings. He had been there once at the arraignment, and that had been enough. He had seen Gregory's face across the courtroom, and Gregory had not looked at him. And Edward had understood that whatever conversation he might have wanted to have with the man he had trusted for 9 years was a conversation that would never happen now. Some doors close in a single morning and cannot be opened again. In the weeks that followed, Edward's life rearranged itself in the small and large ways that lives do after they have been almost ended and given back. He restructured the executive leadership of Whitmore Holdings. He hired an independent firm to audit every contract that Gregory had ever approved. He made changes to the security protocols of the building that he should have made years earlier. He stopped drinking coffee that he had not seen poured. He started taking the stairs in the mornings, all 42 flights of them, 2 days a week. He thought about Marcus Hill every one of those mornings. Doreen Hill and her son stayed at the country property for almost 6 weeks. By the end of the 2nd week, Doreen had stopped sleeping with the lamp on. By the end of the 4th week, Marcus had finished 2 books from the library that Edward had not even known he owned, and had started a 3rd. They walked in the mornings along the small pond behind the house. They ate dinner at a long oak table in a kitchen that had not seen regular use in 12 years. The housekeeper at the property, a quiet older woman named Catherine who had worked for Edward since before his wife had died, told him on the phone one evening that the place had not felt like a home in a very long time, and that it felt like one again. Edward drove out to see them every Sunday. On the 6th Sunday, he sat with Doreen on the small porch that looked over the pond while Marcus practiced casting a fishing line that he had received as a gift from Anthony 2 weeks earlier. The afternoon was warm, the water was still. Edward had brought a folder with him. He set it on the small table between their chairs and did not open it for a long time. "Mrs. Hill," he said eventually, "I have been thinking about what I owe you. I have been thinking about it for 6 weeks. I do not believe I can pay it. I do not believe there is a number that would be the correct number, but there are some things I can do, and I would like your permission to do them." She looked at him. She did not pick up the folder. She waited. "I would like to pay for Marcus's education from this point until he no longer wants to be in school, whatever school he chooses, whatever subject he chooses. I would like to establish a trust in his name that does not depend on me being alive to administer it. I would like to offer you a position in my company, in any role that interests you at any salary you name, with the understanding that you can also choose not to take the position and instead simply allow me to make sure that the 2 of you never again wake up in the morning worrying about whether the rent will be paid on time." She was quiet for a long moment. She looked out at her son by the pond. "Mr. Whitmore," she said finally, "I do not need your money. I have never needed anyone's money. I have needed only enough to keep my son fed and warm and in school, and I have always managed that. So I am not going to take the position, and I am not going to take the salary." She paused. "But I will let you pay for his school, because that is for him and not for me. And I will accept the trust because his father would have wanted him to have something his father could not provide. And I will accept your Sundays for as long as you want to bring them." Edward did not speak for a moment. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you," she said back. They sat in silence and watched Marcus cast his line out over the pond. He was not catching anything. He did not seem to mind. There are stories that we tell ourselves about how the world works, about who matters and who does not, about which lives are visible and which are not. Most of those stories are wrong. Most of the time, the people who save us are not the people we expect. Most of the time, the warnings come from voices we have been trained not to hear, in hallways we do not walk, from children whose names we have never bothered to learn. Marcus Hill walked 4 flights of stairs on a Tuesday morning to tell a man he did not know that something was not right. He did it because his mother had taught him to look at things. He did it because his father, in the last minutes of his own life, had pulled a bus over to protect strangers. He did it because doing the right thing was, in his family, the simplest and the hardest thing in the world. Pay attention to the small voices. Learn the names of the people who clean your buildings, drive your cars, hand you your coffee in the morning. Never assume that the most important person in your life today is the person whose name is already on your calendar. Sometimes the bravest voice in the room is the smallest one. And sometimes, all it takes to change the entire course of a life is 4 words, spoken quietly, by a child who refused to look away. If this story moved you, please tap the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so the next story finds you, too. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and remember always to listen to the small voices in your life. You never know which one might save you.